Hello, my name is Douglas Bloch. I'm an author and a depression survivor. Welcome to another edition of One-on-One with a Depression Counselor. Today's topic is when loss leads to depression. You know, over the years of running these depression support groups, I've noticed that in the vast majority of cases, people who come into these groups do so shortly after they've experienced some sort of a major loss. Breakup of a relationship, divorce, death of a parent, sometimes loss of a job. And I remember one case where his girlfriend left him, and he spent the next 3 months on his couch in his apartment, never leaving until he finally came to my group. As for myself, all 3 of my major depressive episodes at 26, 33, and 47 occurred after splitting up with a partner in my life. Now, why should this be so? Well, many years ago, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross interviewed people in the dying process, and she identified 5 stages of death. The first was shock and denial, then there was anger, then there was bargaining, then depression, and finally acceptance. Notice that depression was the 4th stage. Shortly after her work, Kubler-Ross realized that these stages of death didn't just apply to physical death, they applied to an emotional death, which is what people go through when they lose a husband or a wife through divorce or any other major changes where they're separated from something they're attached to. So if you just take a moment and think about your life, sometimes where you had a major separation, and think for a moment and ask yourself, do these stages of death apply to me? The shock, the anger, the denial, the bargaining, the depression, and finally the acceptance. And I'll let you do that for a minute or two. Now, as I just mentioned, depression is the 4th stage in the 5 stages of death. And if it is allowed to proceed appropriately, then eventually you move into the 5th stage, which is acceptance. However, what if this does not happen? Well, this is what occurred in the lives of 3 famous people who suffered from depression: Abraham Lincoln, the novelist William Styron, and the poet Sylvia Plath. All 3 of them experienced the death of a parent before the age of 11. William Styron and Abraham Lincoln lost their mothers, and Sylvia Plath lost her father at the age of 9. And not only was the death not even talked about, she wasn't even allowed to go to the funeral. So what happened to these people is this depression, this grieving that never was allowed to happen, became frozen grief. And then it later emerged in their childhood. So William Styron was severely depressed in his 50s, had to be hospitalized, wrote about it in a book called Darkness Visible. Abraham Lincoln had bouts of depression. The most famous one is when he was suicidal on the day of his marriage. And then Sylvia Plath eventually did commit suicide after she wrote about her experience in the bell jar. So one way to define depression is to say that it is stuck or frozen grief. And this is why the great psychoanalyst Alice Miller said that it is not the trauma that disables us, it is not the trauma that caused mental illness, it is the repression of the trauma, the not allowing that trauma to be processed and basically completed and grieved. There is, however, a way out, and that is to mourn our losses, especially when they occurred in childhood. Now, this requires the result of a skilled therapist and will take time, and it will also be painful. But as the saying goes, you can't heal what you can't feel. Another way of putting it is, the only way out is through. But once you do go through the darkness, once you do go through the light, you will be restored to life and come alive again and be able to feel joy again. As one of my favorite quotations from the Bible goes, from the Psalms, "They who sow in tears shall reap in joy." This has been Douglas Bloch. I hope you've gotten something valuable from this video. And until we meet again, I wish you the best in your mental health recovery. Thank you.